the executive arm of government, and by extension, the presidency was at the receiving end of scathing public criticism during the week after the details of the 2.17 trillion naira supplementary budget for 2023 it forwarded to the National Assembly revealed what many Nigerians consider as extravagant spending on luxury items meant to service their cravings at the expense of poor citizens struggling to make ends meet in the face of harsh economic realities, revenue shortage, and sharp decline in human development indices as a result of high level of poverty. They lashed out on the executive for planning to spend 5 billion naira on a presidential yacht, 2.9 billion naira to replace cars in the pool of the State House, and another 1.5 billion naira for new cars in the office of the First Lady, an office not known to the Constitution. The presidency has tried to clarify the issue when it explained that the presidential yacht is actually a specialized Navy boat and that it is not for the personal comfort of President Tinubu. The public criticism against these spendings in the supplementary budget came on the heels of similar public outcry over the issues. Lawmakers wanting to gift themselves with the SUVs, each valued at 160 million naira, while the principal officers will also have to receive even much more expensive bulletproof SUVs. Well, all of these have been causing some huge challenges within the polity. Well, to help us understand the issues raised by Nigerians against their leaders, we have joining us in the studio a lawyer and public affairs analyst, Madaki Ameh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And then we would like to let you know that Ameh is a former legal advisor at Shell Petroleum Development Company in Nigeria. And I'm also in the studio. It's a seasoned economist and financial analyst, Dr. Akintunde Ogunsola. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
He's the senior partner at Karma Professional Services. And joining us from London, we have public affairs analyst and a UK-based engineer, Ekeoma Akotaobi. He's also the director of Econ Limited, a business consulting firm. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Let's start with you, Madaki. Talk to us about some of the issues you've seen right here, and of course, what this means in terms of all the spendings. The National Assembly has gone ahead to actually ensure that they pass the 2.17 trillion naira. The executive has tried to explain some of the issues that Nigerians have problems with. Are you satisfied?
Definitely, as a Nigerian, I'm not satisfied at all. The outcry actually runs deep. And, you know, this is not the first time government is doing this. You know, the average Nigerian believes that the government budget, the national budget, is actually for government officials. You know, because if you look at your life from January to December, you can hardly pinpoint one aspect of your life that has been affected by the huge trillions that the budget these days, you know. So 2 months to the end of the year, you know, they rush a 2.17 trillion supplementary budget to the National Assembly. And of course, because we have a rubber stamp National Assembly these days, you know, we don't expect any form of analysis at all, you know, and then they just say, come on, you know, carry go, and, you know, it's passed. What most people are feeling, and I feel the same way personally, is that there are two ways of looking at this expenditure. They are rushing this, you know, to recoup their electoral expenses. That's number one. Number two, you know, some of the line items that they have put there doesn't show any form of sensitivity at all to the earnings of Nigerians. You know, you don't just go buying yourself SUVs or Yoshis and expect that Nigerians will be jubilating at you, you know. The sense of service that is actually supposed to drive people aspiring for public office is no longer there. Right. Everybody goes there, you know, just for what they can feed fat on, and it's very nauseating, quite frankly.
All right, and I bring you in, the economists. We've tried to assemble this team, both of lawyers, economists, and all of that, to help us have an idea of what the people are thinking. Are you in any way, you know, okay with the explanation by the executive on what they say is the reason for this huge expenditure? And then, of course, like when the presidency reacted to the SUVs, and then including the budget for the office of the First Lady, they said it's not just for one person, it's for several bureaucrats appointees and all of that within the State House. I don't know if that makes more sense to you.
Thank you very much, Sambo, for having me on this program. Actually, as an analyst, I took my time to go through that budget and see the line items one after the other. We cannot say because of one or two allocations to government, we say the whole entire supplementary budget is not good. It's not so. Though, yes, they are buying the presidential yacht, which is under the naval expenses, and also the SUVs for the Office of the First Lady. Remember that this is the first budget of this administration. And the last administration has already used their vehicles up to the maximum of 4 years. So those vehicles, they need to be changed. In fact, some of them, I'm very sure, as the last government was going, they even took them away. So there's no doubt about that they need to replace some of these vehicles. Some of these vehicles that they're also ordering or trying to buy, they are security vehicles for the presidential villa. We will not say because the citizens need more protection, we will not protect our president and the people in the villa. So it's not so much. I look at other areas. I saw the wage award for 4 months is also inside the budget.
Yeah, that's for those in the federal public service.
Yes, those in the federal public service. The wage award for 4 months is there. The student loan is also there. When you look at it, I saw a lot of road, especially the Enugu to Port Harcourt Expressway is going to be done with this budget. There are so many other things which are very good. In the FCT, I saw a chunk of funds allocated to 30-kilometer road of all the 6 area councils in FCT. These are part of the expenses inside the budget. So we will not say because of just one 5 billion naira yacht that the president wants to buy.
Yeah.
We now say the whole budget, it's just, they're just being selfish and all that. Even under the agri sector, a lot of money was awarded for seedlings, the dry season farming and all that. The question that I am to ask is that was these things, or were they not captured in the 2023 budget passed by the last administration? So we need to sit down and compare if there's any duplication. And then where the National Assembly needs to rise up is in the area of the oversight to ensure that as government has proposed these funds for this just 2 months, the National Assembly needs to ensure that what they are actually saying they want to implement the funds for are actually done with them.
All right, and we head to our London studio. Our London guest, where we will be speaking with you, Ekeoma. What do you make of all of these expenditures, and then amid the calls for government to be very sensitive to the yearnings of Nigerians on the rising cost of living? And then, of course, here in the UK, do you have the Prime Minister enjoying a yacht as part of his paraphernalia of office?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I think the basic question we need to ask ourselves as Nigerians is, what do governments exist for? I think until we begin to, ask these questions very well and look at it as citizens, then all these things will continue happening. I don't want to also look at this from the perspective of the national budget. This has been a normal thing. It's been going on for years. It's not something that just started happening under the Tinubu's administration. I also want us to understand that, the federal government is a combination of local government, states, then states make up the national government. And you will agree with me that many of the guys that find themselves today in the National Assembly were either governors or commissioners or people that served in the states. And these kind of behaviors have been, tolerated in the states for too long. And because there's no challenge at the lowest level, which is the local government level to the state level, you see these behaviors, what I would call this impunity being transferred to the national government. So I'm really more focused on, like I've been analyzing the budget performance reports that have been released, of different states. And one thing you could stand out is that if you look at the efficiency ratios, which is like if you look at cost of governance versus total revenue, or cost of governance versus total expenditure, you would find out that in some cases, in some states, you see that up to 40-45% of our revenues are used to service the politicians. You look at to service the governors, the judiciary, the state assemblies. So when you see that these things are have been allowed at these local levels, then it becomes a norm when these guys go to the National Assembly or they become presidents. They just do what they want to do. So I think it's time that we just begin to look at where do these problems start from? And I think we begin to look at the state level.
Now, do you think Nigerians are justified in their outrage, considering that these are the same politicians who go to the polls and then, give monies, buy votes here and there, and these same Nigerians collect it only for them to get into office, and they want to recoup some of those funds, and you see Nigerians actually complaining bitterly here and there. So, the process of leadership recruitment, some people say, is very important, and then the cost of politics and elections is also very important, so that when people come into government wanting to recoup some of those funds, maybe through shoddy budget preparations or insertion of some things that are called budget padding, most citizens won't be outraged. What do you make of all of that?
I also think we need to go back to the faucetary goal of what our political parties stand for. What do political parties stand for in Nigeria? In the UK, we have two major parties. We have the Conservative Party, we have the Labour Party. And without being told, what conservatism means, what they stand for. They stand for meticulous utilization of the state's or country's resources to create value for the people, which is actually, in my opinion, why a government exists. Government, the people that are in government are our representatives that have gone there to create value for us. So what do our parties stand for? That's number one. Then number two, what do we actually expect from these politicians? What did they tell us before the election? I mean, has anyone gone to any of their representatives to ask for manifestos? I assume they gave us manifestos. Let's even assume they gave us manifestos. How many times have we asked these our representatives what they have delivered within their manifestos? So I think Nigerians actually we need to begin to look at ourselves and ask the question. Like I in my state, Abia State, I ask this question regularly to my representatives, senators, House of Rep members, House of Assembly members. I want to know what you promised us in the manifesto before we voted for you. I want to see results. So the problem is that Nigerians should actually begin to look at themselves from the areas they can control. If we begin to ask these questions,
to come in
what
here.
did these politicians?
You didn't answer my other first question that I asked, and so before I come to Madaki, I want you to talk to us about that. In the UK, does the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak enjoy the services of a presidential yacht?
I mean, I don't need to answer this kind of question. We have a problem of hunger in Nigeria. We have, I think, one of the highest unemployment rates in probably sub-Saharan Africa. And is the president going to rule us from a yacht? I don't know. I don't think it's a question. Let me just disagree a bit with the last speaker. If you look at the in the UK, the year cars were registered by their registration number. I would like my fellow panelists to just take time and maybe search a video and see the reg number of the car that Rishi Sunak is using. You'll be surprised that it's about 2011 or 12. This was the same car probably that David Cameron used. I mean, this is in my opinion, poor prioritization of priorities. We're looking at Nigerians don't have free medical care. We don't have free education. We don't have pipe-borne water. We don't have security. We don't have the basic things that citizens should have.
I'll just ask you. I will have to ask you to hold on there so that we'll listen to Madaki. I mean, he has laid bare several issues. I mean, what do you have to say about the supplementary budget, including what Akin has said earlier, that look, let's just not focus on only this, and there are some also good things in the supplementary budget which we are not talking about, irrespective of some of those issues or profligacies that the politicians in power are playing around with?
You know, the where my real concern comes is whether the budget can even be implemented as is. You know, because I don't see where the sense of urgency is. You know, what is it that cannot wait for another 2 months for the new budget to take off in January? Don't forget that they've already made the budget for 2024, and very soon it will be presented to the National Assembly. What I expect a responsible government to do would be to include the, you know, to capture whatever they want to capture in the supplementary budget, in the new budget, so that we can have a robust 2024, you know, budget, which is already going to be passed by the National Assembly. You know, in fact, very soon they're going to start their committees. They will start all those rituals.
Yeah, the budget defense sessions.
Budget defense sessions, you know, the rituals. And it's actually ritualistic. You know, most of the budget challenge sessions are extremely empty and devoid of any form of content. So if they are going to do this already for the 2024 budget, why the rush? Knowing that budget implementation in this country is always abysmal. Maybe they implement about 30 or 40, 35% of the budget at the end, in full year. So why wouldn't they just wait, you know, and incorporate, since governance is a continuum? This idea of, you know, one government has just come, another one, you know,
it's a new government, left, you know, we need to have our own budget.
All the cars and all of that. Many of the people who are in government today have actually been feeding fat on government at one level or the other, on and on and on. If you go to their houses, you see countless vehicles that have been provided by government over time. Many of them, they may never have even driven them at all. So so you now go and add another 160 million naira car, you know, to all of, and that's only one of the cars. That's the one we are hearing about. There must be many more, you know, that are in that entourage. You know, so governance is no longer about the people.
Yeah, and you raise, sorry to just interject there, you raise a critical issue. How are we even going to generate the monies to fund this budget, including the profligacies?
Exactly. Nigeria as a country borrows money to support their budget. Are you going to, how will you justify to my son, for instance, you know, my children, that, you know, that the government that is broke, Nigeria is supposed to be a broke country, and we actually are a broke country the way it's being run. You know, if we are broke and we have to go borrow money from the IMF and all the other places, the way they are borrowing money cap in hand right now, and then you say you are borrowing to buy SUVs for oversight functions for National Assembly members who already have several cars in their entourage, you know, so what are we talking about? You know, when is governance going to become about the people?
All right.
You know, rather than this selfish, you know, acquisitionist tendency of feeding fat on an already drowning country that, you know, hardly has any justifiable source of income. You know, if you look at it, you know, year in, year out, we're
with our oil reserves,
it's amazing.
I mean, having issues here and there. All right, Akin, how do we fund this supplementary budget and, of course, the 2024 budget that is coming through? People are saying that we should cut down on some of these demands by these politicians. Can we truly make any more savings if we cut back on those SUVs and all of that will be worth the while?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. In fact, when I heard supplementary budgets, that was the first question I asked. Supplementary budget by this time, where is the money coming from? Now, Nigeria is not broke. We have removed subsidy since May 29. And it means that we have saved trillions of money from May 29 up till now. So Nigeria has a lot of money in savings.
Well, one minister said there's nothing like that.
That's what
Nigeria
they will say.
Actually borrowing.
That's what they will say. But you know, you agree with me that removal of subsidy, they said, we bring about savings of Nigeria's money, billions of dollars that was supposed to have paid for subsidy of petrol. So the money is still there. Secondly, during the FEC meeting, our annual, what they share every month is getting close to 2 trillion. And the president gave instruction that, okay, just share about 900 or 1 trillion and save the remaining. So all these savings, they are actually there.
Will it be that it's because of the savings that they are also trying to feed fat on it and say, look, we have some money, so let's take some and really, you know, feel good. But on the streets, when you go out, I mean, it doesn't really show that we have some savings. People are complaining. The price of petrol is going up, the price of food. I mean, look at all the statistics being churned out by MBS. You're an economist and you know that we've been having a downward trend. Yeah,
in fact, I have been criticizing the government over the time due to the policies where the dollar went, the dollar to the naira went as far as close to 1,350 and all that, but it's coming down now. What I want to see, I want us to hold government to their words. The government promised that by December, the Port Harcourt refinery will be at work. We are going to stop importation. December is just next month. Me, I'm waiting to see that. Dangote refinery, they will soon supply them crude so that we will now begin to refine the crude oil and get diesel aviation fuel. I am waiting to see that. Rather than, me making noise about, the senators bought the same type of vehicles. We all make noise.
At the end of the day,
nothing changes. Okay. They bought those SUVs.
Yeah, and I'm coming back to you. You are an expert in terms of petroleum and then all the legal issues here and there concerning that industry. We don't seem to be producing enough at the moment, though we've risen a little bit in terms of the barrels of oil produced per day. But looking at oil theft and how that major source of funding for the country seems to be suffering, do you think that we'll be able to have enough from that oil industry, the oil and gas industry, to sustain and fund both the supplementary and 2024 budget?
I don't think so. The reason is that and that's again a world first. Nigeria is the only country that is running their oil and gas industry at a loss. The net figures after the sale of crude and the importation of finished products actually leaves a big hole, because we spend more to import the refined products than we earn when we sell our crude, no matter what the price is at the international market, because the price of the refined products always chases the price of crude. So there's no amount of sale you will generate, and then when you're importing, the refined products at the end of the day, that it will make sense. So we are better off not even selling any crude at all, because there's no point, running a business at a loss that's as expensive as it is, spending billions on salaries of workers who are not refining a single barrel of crude oil and all of that. So we run a very strange oil industry in Nigeria, where people just go to work in the morning, do nothing, and come back home.
Yeah, we actually have refineries that are not functioning, exactly, and then we are paying staff salaries
and all of that. So I don't see how the oil industry, if you look at the 2023 budget, the amount that was expected to be contributed from the oil and gas sales was actually an infinitesimal part of the revenue expectations from. And this is an industry that can actually almost completely sustain this country if it were not run so inefficiently. I keep saying it. Subsidy has always been a self-inflicted injury. We had no business suffering Nigerians as the government is currently suffering us, because actually government is suffering us. I don't think we had a problem with subsidy, because the subsidy as we knew it and as we still know it today, because I hear
that subsidy has
crept in again. There are billions, inching toward the trillions that are still being put in the books as subsidy, even as of today. We are running the oil industry in a very inefficient manner, and it's actually a colossal disaster. Okay. I don't know how long this can continue for.
Well, very difficult situation for Nigeria. And I'll come back to you, Ekema. As we try to round off this conversation, let's talk about how to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria. The profligacy we see both at the federal, state, and local government seems to be alarming. People get into office and they are not, worried as to how to solve problems, but just how to just do some basic things and then just transfer the problem to another government. What do we do?
Yeah, it goes back to number one, what political parties stand for. What you and I are doing here, I think the media, will have their role to play, but if you look at other democracies, if you saw what happened in the US the other day, where the government nearly shut down because the opposing party refused to approve some of the funds that the president asked for. You look at the UK, there are always two sides. There's always the party in power and the opposition party. But the question you would ask yourself is, in this whole thing that happened in the National Assembly, what was the role of the PDP or the which is now the opposition party? And the answer is nothing. So I think we just need to go back to the drawing board. But the other things you didn't mention here as well that we haven't also, we're talking about 5 billion naira yacht. But what about the unaccounted for security vote that nobody knows how much, what percentage will come to at the end of, we will see what it comes to at the end of the annual financial report they are going to publish. And that is why in my analysis in my own states in the Southeast, I've looked at a few states in Nigeria. We don't have anything like, for example, you see some governors spending up to 20% of over 20% of the state's revenue in running their office. I mean, the budget performance report for the states have been published just this week. And I've taken a look at up to 5 states. And you see one state, like my own state, Abia, you see the governor using 21.1% of the revenue to run the state, to run his governor's office. You go to Benue, the governor of Benue used 1.2%. You go to Ebonyi, the governor of Ebonyi used 1.5%. But what is the figure that is acceptable? So I think the opposition parties need to start doing their jobs. I think that is what that has to be done. Then secondly, like I said, the federal government did not just appear from nowhere. We started from local governments, state governments, federal governments. And from what I've seen in my advocacy for good governance in Abia State, I think if citizens begin to push their politicians from the state level, I think we're going to make a difference. Like I've been pushing in Abia for the major part of this week now, talking about the security vote, where on top of the cost of running office, our governor is taking about 11% of the revenue as security vote. Then you go to other states are taking 1%. So what is the acceptable figure? So I believe, in my opinion, that citizens, number one, need to start putting pressure.
Yeah. All right.
Citizens need.
No, I mean, just round off.
Yeah. Number one, citizens have to, take up the responsibility of, in the absence of the opposition parties, take up the responsibility of putting pressure at the state level. It's achievable. I've done it in Abia. It's working. Again, the political parties in opposition, we call on the PDP or in the states where you were the opposition parties, they should do their jobs. Yeah. Politics should not just be a place for making money. It should be about service. We should ask ourselves this question: why are we in power?
All right, very interesting position. I don't think the average Nigerian politician will actually believe what you have said, that politics is not all about money making, because the cost of politicking and elections in the country is actually super expensive. And so, just like you have said, we need to work hard on that. And that's why I'm bringing you back in, Dr. Ayo Ogunsola. Then let's talk about how realistic it is that we can build a lean government within these times, because we've been calling for lean government, but what we have seen is the reverse. We've seen a very large cabinet. We've seen several appointees and all of that. Former President Buhari tried to cut back on all of those things, including allowing permanent secretaries to run the ministries for 6 months. And yet, it looks like despite all those measures, not much was achieved. What more can we do to reduce the cost of governance?
Thank you very much. Reducing the cost of governance is very important because resources are scarce. Nigeria has borrowed so much that we can't even account for what we borrowed these monies for over the years. They said it was for critical infrastructures, but I can tell you part of these funds were used for these frivolities that we are talking about. Now, for us to get a lean budget so that we can achieve more, especially talking about the ratio between the capital expenditure to the recurrent expenditure. The government needs to actually look into this, possibly looking at maybe going forward to 2024 budget. The National Assembly should look at how to cut down the recurrent expenditures and then, approve or appropriate more expenditures to the capital. And that is where the citizens of Nigeria will have more benefits. If we continue to appropriate more funds to the current expenditures, we'll have the situation of this, cost of servicing the government. This most times goes under the recurrent expenditure. So if we can reduce our recurrent expenditures to about let's say 40%, and then the capital should be 60%, then we will know that yes, government is now ready to work.
You think that's feasible under this Tinubu administration?
Yes, I believe it's feasible under this government.
Okay, and reducing cost of governance, what do we do?
Well, I think it should start from first principles, and that is the cost of running for election. Because most politicians go in there and for the first maybe 1 or 2 years, what they are hoping to do is to recoup all the cost of what it cost them to get into the office. First of all, I think it's near criminal for the political parties to charge people atrocious amounts of money to even purchase a 4-page form, to contest an election. The courts ought to strike that down because that's directly an infringement of the right guaranteed in the Constitution to vote and be voted for. You cannot go and set an artificial amount of money, 20 million naira, 50 million naira, an obscene 100 million naira to run for an office, and expect that the person, after scrambling to raise that kind of money, will not want to get it back, So I think that the cost of running for office, as currently structured, is actually emasculating the political space and making it impossible for honest people who have not stolen government money to aspire for office. And that's why the level of performance in governance in Nigeria is very abysmal, because it's like a cabal. You have to either be sponsored by someone who has already stolen government money, or you have to have found the source from which you have been, emasculating this country and stealing money. And if governance revolves around such people, you cannot expect much quality, going forward. And then, because of that urge to recoup, as soon as they are put in positions, all of the so-called legislators and so on are looking for juicy committees. I don't know about juice, but all of them, they know which of the committees are juicy. And then they want those juicy committees so that they can do oversight and then recoup their... So it's a cyclical, circle of, it's a circle of corruption that's difficult to break, because right from first principles of when you want to aspire to govern, you already have to start acquiring, an arsenal to enable you make any headway in the electoral process.
And that's
if
why
we don't solve it from those first principles, we're going to just be chasing shadows, and it's never going to work.
I guess that's why former President Olusegun Obasanjo called it do or die politics, because everybody wants to just get in there and go after the cake. But we must thank you so much. Madaki Ameh is a former legal advisor at Shell Petroleum Development Company in Nigeria. We must thank you so much for helping us to understand these issues. And of course, Dr. Akintunde Ogunsola is an economist and senior partner at Kama Professional Services. We must thank you immensely for joining us to help us understand these issues. And of course, from London, we've had Ekeoma Akotobi, who is a structural engineer and the director of Econ Limited, business consulting firm in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for helping us to understand what it means to reduce the cost of governance, and we just hope the politicians will listen to you.